Now, joining us here in our Washington studios are two distinguished guests. Lij Seifu Zewdie of the Ethiopian opposition party, the People's Congress for United Struggle, also known as Shengo, and Peter Heinlein, Voice of America correspondent, who until recently reported for us from the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, for at least 5 years. Sure. Well, I have to say, frankly, gentlemen, that it's a pleasure having you on Straight Talk Africa.
Well, thank you very much, Shaka.
Thank you, Shaka. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, in your particular case, I think the last time I had you on the show was actually after the elections of 2005.
Exactly. Exactly, the famous election.
I'm glad that you are still in one piece.
The end of democracy.
And of course, Peter, for the first time, we're having you right here in Washington because you've appeared on the show, but from different parts of the African continent.
That's right. It's good to be here in the studio with you, Shaka. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution so far. Both on a programming note, we invited the Ethiopian ambassador to the United States, Gerima Biru Geda, but by the time we went on air today, we had not heard back from them. We apologize for that. Later in the program, we'll give you, the audience, a chance to call and talk with our guests. The number to call is 202-619-3111, and the US country code is 1. Well, first of all, it's a pity, frankly, Peter, that, you know, when Meles died, a man you've covered for the last 5 years, you happened to be out of the country.
Yes, I just left weeks before he disappeared. In fact, less than a week before he disappeared. It was, I mean, I actually had seen him fairly recently before that, and he was looking a little pale, but there was really no indication from those meetings and from his appearances on TV that he was any more ill than usual, although there had been rumors for years that he was suffering from some unknown disease, unknown to us at least.
Are you surprised by the manner in which Ethiopians in particular and the world has reacted to his death?
I don't think I'm surprised at all. He's certainly a man who left a mixed legacy. And I think the tributes you hear to his achievements are well-founded. He did achieve a lot. But at the same time, you hear a wellspring of opinion from Ethiopians, and unfortunately not so much from Ethiopians within Ethiopia because their voices are somewhat suppressed, but from the voices of other Ethiopians, expatriate Ethiopians, like my colleague sitting next to me, we see a different picture, let's say, and I think we'll hear that.
What about you, Lij Seifu Zewdie? Are you surprised in the manner in which you Ethiopians in particular have reacted to Meles' passing away and the African continent in general, especially the African leaders?
Yes, it is indeed a great surprise to me because it was evidently a spectacle stage managed by the Ministry of Information in Ethiopia. We are all sorry when any relations or any person dies. Mm-hmm. But that kind of manifestation was too political to me.
Is that unusual?
Very
at
unusual.
Least from the cultural standpoint, really, if you look
Yes.
at the manner in which big people or leaders in Ethiopia have been treated, especially when they are sick?
No. I mean, it's a very subdued time of reflection and sorrow. Not really a kind of uniformal upheaval of wailing and crying and what actually you probably haven't realized is most of the questions asked are answered in the same fashion.
For example?
Well, they say it's not only a loss for Ethiopia, but for all Africa. We lost our father, blah, 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 blah.
He was arguably a spokesperson for Africa on certain issues.
Indeed. You have to play the role of that you are given in context of the African leaders and OAU, I mean EU, mm-hmm. OA, whatever. But The thing is, what have you done to your own people? He is supposed to be a champion of anti-terrorist partner to United States, and so he is a terrorist for us.
The government, of course, will argue that he built a lot of roads, schools.
The amount of money you dish out to him, if you were to give it to me, I'll make Ethiopia look like Paris. It's not an excuse.
I see.
And how much money has been doled out to him, you know, throughout the 10 years alone is over 21 billion.
What about U.S. President Obama's reaction that Meles was committed to the poor, the problems of the poor?
This is Shaka. This is what we feel sensitive about. Ethiopians now in the streets are begging for injera. They're going into places in hotels behind the scene.
The basic commodity?
No, even food to live.
But this didn't begin with the Meles?
Oh, no. Even now. Did you see the television interviews they made of people lined up behind Hilton?
Yes.
When? Yesterday only. They're buying their food with $2 a drop.
You covered Ethiopia for a long time. You talked about how Meles leaves a mixed legacy, if I recall correctly. Why should that surprise you? After all, human beings really, aren't they composites of contradiction, someone might argue?
Oh, of course. You're absolutely right, Shaka. But in the case of Meles Zenawi, he embodied two extremes, if you will, almost. On the one hand, he was the leader who was criticized for diverting food aid and using it for to get himself and his party reelected, using food as a political weapon. That's a serious charge, and there is. You know, I mean, you can argue one way or the other on that case. The government filed complaints against the BBC, for instance, for airing that charge. But there are arguments that there's some evidence that certainly that has happened. And I did investigate myself, and I found that there was substance to some of those charges, although we'll leave the actual judgment to others. But at the same time, it's not for nothing that Meles Zenawi represented Africa, not just Ethiopia, at the climate change negotiations, at the G8, at the G20. He was, behind the scenes, a driving force in the African Union. And it's also not just a coincidence that Hillary Clinton herself went to Addis Ababa last year to have her picture taken shaking Meles Zenawi's hand and thanking him for the role he played in helping to bring independence to South Sudan. He was the man with the stature, both in Sudan and with the Southerners. They both had faith in him enough to accept his mediation, which resulted in what many people thought just a few months before independence would have been impossible. So he has a reputation as a statesman, as well as his other reputation at home as a repressive tyrant.
What about that, Lij Seifu Zewdie? You have a problem with that? Very remarkably articulate?
Well, you're looking at, no, this is not a beauty contest. Running a country is not a beauty contest. We have to think what he did to his people.
We are not talking about how beautiful he was.
No, it's not that.
We are rather
but you are talking about who adores him.
We're talking
if
about...
Mrs. Clinton adores him, it doesn't mean Ethiopian people adore him. That is a big reservation I have to put to you. You have been.
What about all those people that we see in Addis Ababa who are mourning?
It was a stage-managed show.
I hope you are not suggesting that this man who was in power for 21 good years did not have supporters.
You know what kind of government he's leading? He's an ethnicist federal leader. He is actually promoting an ethnic federation in Ethiopia. And most of his government is dominated by his clan. The Adwa group, which you just mentioned a time ago.
Yes.
You know, in the army, there is not even one Woromo in the command. It's all Adwa guys.
In fairness,
in security,
in fairness
no, let me
Meres,
finish.
it is not limited to Ethiopia. You could talk about Kenya, you could talk about Uganda, you could talk about Rwanda, we could talk about a lot of countries on the continent.
Well, that doesn't make it right in Ethiopia in any case.
Nor does it make it right anywhere for that
anywhere.
matter.
So why press this issue? All dictators tend to bring their own clans and their own sectors into power, and that's why they perpetuate themselves. And if you deny the democratic rights to all other people to contest elections, to the press to mention what is happening in the country, you imprison a press individual for 15 years for life for saying the truth. What kind of system is he leading? It is a Gestapo system.
Do you agree with Lij Seifu about some of these things that he's saying?
No, I don't disagree with what he's saying. I would only argue that it's not a black and white picture.
Right.
Meles Zenawi was a human being. He was a man with faults, but he was...
Just like all of us.
Like all of us. But he was an exceptionally smart man. He was a guy who was able to take a vision, and you can disagree with that vision, and I do disagree with many parts of that vision. I'm sorry if I'm banging my microphone, but he did what he thought would make the country better. We disagree. I mean, we both agree that his vision was wrong and took the country probably down a disastrous path.
Do you see any evidence suggest that in that process he was actually sincere?
I believe, and I saw the man up close over the past 5 years, and I questioned him at length about his motives and the ideas he had, and I'm convinced that, you know, and I disagree fundamentally with his ideas and his philosophy, but he believed that he was taking Ethiopia on a path that would raise it up and make it better for the average person. And he
without consulting them?
Yes, without consulting them, but he believed, for instance, which I fundamentally disagree with, that markets were failing. I don't believe the markets were failing. I think government interference with the markets was the problem. But he was trying his best, using the knowledge he had, to make those market work so it would make life better for the people, that they could afford their groceries.
I'd like to mention just one final point. The Shango, the organization.
What does it mean?
It's the Ethiopian People's United Struggle for Freedom.
I see.
Now,
very good.
That has been formed with the participation of 16 organizations and civic and political organizations and individuals of great knowledge of Ethiopia. And that organization is bringing all the oppositions together because, as my friend has pointed out, 5 years ago, or a little 7 years ago probably, in 2005, when the election was seen to be lost for Meles, he clamped down on all operation, declared an emergency, closed the counting of the election, and came out and said he won by what?
Yes.
99.6%. Now listen, after that, he imprisoned all the political party leaders, the most atrocious charges of treason to the country and so on. If you were to do here, if for instance, Mr. President Obama was to do that and imprison all the leaders of the political parties, ban the newspapers from publishing anything, put them in jail, confiscate them, even close the human rights organization.
It would be a different ball
What
game.
would you say? That's what happened in our country.
Let me ask you, Peter. Peter, you were there. Share with us your experiences. What was it like as a journalist, really, covering a story in Addis Ababa, for example? In your particular case, you were an international journalist, and you probably had a few breaks here and there. Talk about the manner in which the ordinary Ethiopian journalist, for example, was able to carry out his or her duties as a journalist.
Thank you very much for that opportunity, Shaka.
Yeah.
Because over the 5 years I was there, I saw a shrinking of the space in which independent or private journalists could operate. There was even a shrinking of the space in which international journalists could operate. But of course, we're special. We aren't subject to the laws in the same way Ethiopian journalists are. My friend...
Is that fair?
No. Is it? No, of course it's not fair.
Two journalists are in jail now.
Yeah, well...
For 15 years.
Exactly. My friend Eskinder Nega is facing a lengthy jail sentence.
For what?
Because he was a severe and an intelligent critic of the government, and he never relented in his criticism of the government policies. And for that, he was accused of being a terrorist.
Was he a terrorist, in your view?
I know Eskinder Nega very well, and I don't want to get into questions of guilt or not.
Say the truth, man. Say the truth.
I know that this is an honorable man, and it sickens me that he's in prison, and I wish for the day when he's free.
Lij Seifu Zewdie made a point a little bit earlier in the show. He said rather he seemed to be wondering as to why does it seem that foreigners, for example, have a certain view of Meles Zenawi. They look at him as a good guy, a guy that delivers, a guy that loves his people. And yet, the Ethiopian people themselves happen to have a different view. Why is that so? For example, there is this great economist at Columbia University, Joseph Stiglitz. He used to be the chief economist of the World Bank. He has praised and showered praise on Meles Zenawi. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni. He has said that these are remarkably intelligent people who know the problems of their country, who love their people, and who are doing their best. And yet, when you talk to people who come to Ethiopia, people who come to Uganda, they have a different story.
Exactly.
Why is there that kind of disconnect?
Well, they are not affected because they're friends from abroad. The real people are the ones that suffer and should be speaking on behalf of the people. You cannot praise somebody because he speaks good English, good mannerism, etc.
Or perhaps he treats you nicely. He treats you nicely.
Exactly. But, you know, in my history lesson at the university, somebody explained what Hitler did to Germany, how he got them up from their bootstrap to become a most mighty nation. But in the end, he said, you know who it was? It was Hitler. Then their opinion is different.
Let's get a reaction from Peter. Let's get a reaction from Peter.
No, please, let us be objective.
What is objectivity?
The objectivity is the truth. The truth, we say, we Ethiopians, except his own sect, which is 5% of the population in Ethiopia.
He certainly must have much more than 5% support.
No, he has, all the other bodies have been grafted from the prisons in Eritrea and become heads of each unit that he has developed. And most of his ministers are in fact running it.
But it's important to try to put yourself away from the little picture and see the bigger picture that diplomats and other heads of state see, as well as what the little people in Ethiopia see. the people of Ethiopia really have very little voice. They're not able to say what they really think.
Very little. Do they have any?
Nothing.
Yeah, because the state controls the media very, very tightly. And to that extent, I'll agree completely with my friend. But there is a different side, another side to the story. The side that Yoweri Museveni sees, the side that the United States government sees, the side that the climate change negotiators and Joseph Stiglitz see. And that is a man who was really, by any standard, brilliant.
Hello, Shaka, it is Charles.
Charles? Go ahead, please.
Charles.
Go ahead, Charles from Nigeria.
Shaka, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Hello, Shaka.
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah. I think Zenawi stayed for too long in power, and he should have stepped down.
He should have stepped down.
I don't know why African leaders are always staying for too long.
I see.
And Museveni himself now should be thinking of stepping down. So I don't know. It's something that it's a problem really in Africa.
What about Biya? What about your neighbor? What about your neighbor Paul Biya of Cameroon?
Like I said, it's an African problem. It's an African problem, and you know, it's just the same thing is happening in Zimbabwe. You know, the 87-year-old ruler, Mugabe.
What about
Mugabe,
Angola?
They have called it but
what about Equatorial Guinea, which is not very far from you? Teodoro Obiang, since 1979.
Shaka Ssali, the problem is an African problem. Look at what happened in North Africa. Look at what happened in Libya. Gaddafi used to go, even in Egypt, you know.
Egypt.
Also in Mubarak.
So the problem is an African problem.
But is it the issue really of staying long, or is it a question of not delivering, not doing the right thing? Because frankly, let's face it, there was a man called Lee Kuan Yew.
Yes.
From Singapore.
We know. We know.
He ran that city-state for 31 good years, but he had something to show for it. He developed that country from a third world to a first world.
But to be, in principle, in a democratic country, in a pluralist democratic country which everybody ought to aspire, all our problems of starvation, all the shortcomings that we are mentioning could be solved if our country was democratized and actually everyone else is represented in the seat of government. Now the dictators, when they say a word of propaganda, all the media in the world carry out their news. They even come to threaten, like your organization, not to broadcast to Ethiopia. They blocked.
Voice of America.
Voice of America.